When you Google the term European art, pictures of gilded frames and prestigious figures, heavy detailing, and vivid colors appear. This is precisely how you identify European art. Today, we discuss one of those movements, art of the Pre Raphaelites, that identifies European art as a whole. This is one of the most decadent and glorious depictions of visual images collected and presented by Isha Amir. Before we talk about what Pre Raphaelite means and what significance this term holds in history, we have to decipher what Pre Raphaelite, the word, is for beginners. So, Pre Raphaelite, as the name suggests, focuses on a time before the Raphaelites, right? Now, Raphaelite, or it was a movement that followed the artistic principles of the painter Raphael, one of the most prestigious Italian painters. Raphael was associated with the Renaissance movement and was called the Supreme High Renaissance because he was deemed as the highest standard in painting. His art style was more classic and biblical in most sorts. He painted the crucifixion and paintings of Plato and Aristotle, all things that were very classic in their reference. His style of painting is regarded as Italian primitives. Now let's jump to the 19th century Victorian period. A group of students at the Royal Academy of Arts formed a secret society called the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. This was formed in 1848, and this was obviously the Victorian period, time of immense industrialization and poverty. To have that mechanism of escape and preaching the nobility of a time that was once peaceful and heroic, that's what these Pre Raphaelite brothers did. This youthful rebellion opposed contemporary painting and they wanted to reform art in order to reform morals. They wanted to bring a truer side of nature to the world, which may depict them as romantics, keeping in mind that this was a secret society the first 2 years. The first painters that exhibited their art used the initials PRB. This discussion is very idyllic and romantic as well, considering the romantic era was just before this, where you hide your identity as a youthful hideout from the chaos of the world. So all of this seems very idyllic and romantic. They could be deemed as romantics. So who are these rebels? What made these rebels so special? We'll trace art through some important characteristics. There is a joyful connection to traditions, and therefore, we find a lot of medieval imagery, costumes. The idea of beauty is very medieval, medieval ideals, and the reimagination of archaic stories such as myths, and incorporating those elements with some Victorian values as well. There is exceptional detail and bright colors, and we'll see further and trace them into different aspects of what these Pre Raphaelite brothers wanted to present to the world. Dante Gabriel Rossetti, John Everett Millais, William Holman Hunt were among the founders of the Pre Raphaelite movement. We shall explore their art and many more artists' painting through these characteristics. First, we have the first Pre Raphaelite painting, Isabella, by Sir John Everett Millais. This painting is inspired by John Keats's poem Isabella that tells us a tragic love story. Notice the vivid colors each of these characters have. The costumes are very medieval in their essence. Isabella is being offered a plate of oranges, which is a sign of luxury, by Lorenzo, who is her lover. Notice him adorned in plush pink. Their costumes are very reminiscent of the Middle Ages. If you take this particular part, This whole scene imagines a very romantic nature as opposed to whatever violence is happening on his her brother's expressions with his poking the dog. This might represent some kind of an opposition going on during the Victorian period in such luxury that is happening over here with the wine and the bundles of fruit. We see a lot being told with this very subtle movement. However, this painting does represent a kind of foresight because what is about to happen is that Isabella's brother is about to behead Lorenzo. And so the silence in each of these faces just depicts some kind of calm before the storm. This painting is a reimagination of the myth Eco and Narcissus. Narcissus, who is a metaphor for narcissism, looks at himself in the pond. Very beauteous energy of nature and narcissism, as well as the medieval ideal of beauty and the bright colors of the flowers, all are very picturesque, and that is mostly what the concept of Pre-Raphaelite movement was, to create these beauteous pictures with lots of colors and maybe reimagining biblical references or mythical creatures. Similar to Isabella, other artists also used poetry and Shakespearean characters in their art. Many artists reimagined the medieval setting of John Keats's poem La Belle Dame Sans Mercy. According to the poem, the knight falls in love with the beautiful enchantress. This is a very alluring quality of women and nature, how spellbinding they can be. It's a whole fantasy. You can see how romantic tales inspired these artists, where women were shown to be very enchanting or someone who could capture the innocence of a knight. Very medieval in their storytelling. Which brings me to the concept of the muse. The muse, quite literally, for many artists, were these beautiful women, either from real life or Shakespeare. There is a fascination with red-headed women, where they depict them to be the standard of epic infatuation. The muse or model for many paintings in Pre-Raphaelite art is a woman named Elizabeth Siddal. Elizabeth Siddal sat down for many of William Morris's and Dante's paintings, and Dante later married her. She was a muse for many of his art, and the most famous of them was Ophelia, which I will discuss in a while. Now, as all men do, or most men do, Dante had an affair with another woman who was also the wife of a very famous painter as well. Dante was completely infatuated by her beauty, and her features were very, very prominent for him. Elizabeth Siddal sat down for the reimagination of Ophelia from Shakespeare's Hamlet, and this is one of the most famous paintings of the movement. We see Muse relaxed in some melancholy, and in this particular painting, she's relaxed in a river, immersed in water and surrounded by nature, this vivid colors and somewhat beauteous depiction of what feeling sad might feel like. Jane Morris was Dante's muse for many of his paintings. Jane was his Venus in Astarte Syriaca, a Syrian goddess, his Beatrice and his Pandora, and all of these references somehow make her feel immortal, like a goddess. So, Jane in this particular painting on the right acts as some kind of, as I would imagine it, as someone who represents some kind of a Christian principle which in most cases is mostly patriarchal, but here, as a woman represents three main values of Victorian Christianity, I think it resembles something that, or it remarks at something that is quite controversial and maybe revolutionary as well. Similarly, Dante and other artists used characters to reimagine them with long, lustrous red locks, very seductive in their position and manner. As we see here, Lady Lilith, a biblical reference, which is Lady Lilith was more popularly referenced as Adam's wife, and Marianne from Tennyson's poetry. This depiction of women's role in society, their manner and position, more revealing, but in a very homely and alluring way. Also, the depiction of women's role in society as inclined to prostitution in the Victorian period. Here, the lady is seen rising from the man's lap, an act of freeing herself and taking control. This painting is henceforth named The Awakening Conscience. And we can see the minute details like the glove and the thread. This is pure Pre-Raphaelite, the amount of detailing, and each particular scene, if you look at closely, depicts something different. And this whole painting is pure Pre-Raphaelite. In conclusion, I present this painting by Edward Burne-Jones, a very scenic portrayal of love contrasted with ruin of the social climate, an approach to revive medieval romance with love adorned music in the face of the Victorian era. Thank you so much for watching. If anything in this video was misinformed, make sure to let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel.